Okay, welcome everybody. Happy Friday if you are in the Northern Hemisphere, and happy Saturday to our wonderful presenter today, Kelsie, who is joining us all the way from Australia. My name is Becky Krieger. I am the outreach coordinator at Hilltop Children's Center, and this is our final session of our spring workshop series before we jump into our summer programming. And as always, we are so grateful to you for being part of this community. We would not have an outreach institute if it wasn't for all you beautiful, dedicated professionals who come to these trainings and participate and share your wisdom and knowledge. So thank you for being here. Just some housekeeping items before I introduce Kelsie and we jump into our content. You can access closed captioning in your Zoom screen by clicking on the three dots at the bottom or top of your menu screen. You can also select your language preference when you select your closed captioning. We do appreciate people having their mute button turned on just to minimize background sound. And if you are able to, we love seeing your beautiful faces. Having your camera on is really helpful for connection building and totally understand if that's not possible for you today. And we ask that you just participate to the best of your ability when we have our breakout session. There will be an opportunity for you to chat with other participants and encourage you to raise your digital hand or your physical hand if you're on camera if you want to ask a question out loud. And of course, please utilize that chat for questions and supportive reactions and comments and such. I'm going to let a few more people in from the waiting room here. And we are so excited to welcome Kelsie here, the occupational therapist. Kelsie is a occupational therapist, as you might have guessed, who shares passionately every day with thousands of parents, teachers, and professionals, adults simply seeking to heal childhood wounds in their own selves, teaches them about the healing and power and play as the core meaningful occupation that underlies childhood. Kelsie has worked on an Air Force base in England, in rural Oklahoma, and currently in Geelong, Australia. They've developed a unique perspective on various Western systems of healthcare and education, as well as the ways that all of those intersect and affect the children that they work with every day. So, welcome, Kelsie. And before I pass the mic to you, we'll pause as we always do in our Outreach Institute events for a land acknowledgement. So, we ask you all to just take a moment to acknowledge that wherever you are tuning in from today, we are all living, working, standing on occupied Indigenous lands that continue to be stewarded and cared for by the Indigenous communities that have been here since time immemorial. So, where I and the Hilltop faculty are in Seattle and King County, we acknowledge the Duwamish, the Suquamish, the Muckleshoot, and the Snoqualmie tribes, as well as our neighboring Puyallup and Tulalip tribes. We want to recognize that simply naming the lands we are on, while an important way of resisting Indigenous erasure in our society, can become performative when it lacks education and action. So we ask you to join Hilltop in our ongoing journey and challenge of becoming stronger advocates for Indigenous social justice. We encourage you to seek out local resources, continue to learn more about the history of the land where you work and live, and find meaningful ways to connect children and families to the land that you are on. And I'd like to share in the chat some resources to help you with your education and activism journey, including a short video that our faculty actually watched this morning about the history of the building of the ship canal in Seattle, the Native communities that lived along those waterways, the impact that that project had on their livelihood and their homes, and the ways that they continue to persevere and defend their fishing rights in Washington State. So I will drop that in the chat for you. And I thank you for your presence. And without further ado, I pass the mic off to Kelsie. Welcome, Kelsie.
I'm going to disappoint everybody by not having an Australian accent. So you just have to listen to me from Oklahoma the whole time. I'm so excited to be here with you guys, though. This is the first talk that I feel like I'm getting to do since a big move a couple of months ago to be here on the other side of the world. And I'm really excited that I still am able to, that I didn't have to give up being able to connect and speak with you guys, or speak with people in the States, or, find ways to make it work. So, um, uh, when I started like writing this talk, figuring out how it is that I wanted to talk to you about the basics of sensory processing and unpuzzling sensory mismatch, then I run into a roadblock, which is that I want you to be picturing kids before I start explaining the nuances of sensory processing, but it helps if you understand sensory processing before I start naming the kids. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a story about a few hypothetical students. They are only hypothetical because I invented them so that they would fit perfectly into one box and no other boxes. And in real life, of course, people are a little bit messier than that. We don't typically just fit into exactly one box. But as you listen to me talk about them, you may hear someone who sounds like yourself. You may hear someone who sounds like a kid you work with. You may hear someone who sounds like a kid that you parent. And that is all really great connections to be making. So just try maybe thinking about it from that lens. So I'm going to start by telling you about Sam. When Sam is 3, before Sam has ever gone to daycare or childcare setting of any kind, then Sam stays home all day with their parent, and their parent quickly learns that any kind of loud noise is just going to be completely unacceptable. Like running the vacuum is going to send Sam into a complete spiral. Turning on the blender to make a smoothie, that's not going to happen. And sometimes their parent can manage to like take the blender in another room so that they can make it and leave Sam somewhere else, but that might be tricky because Sam is a little bit of a clingy kid and wants to be hanging on to their parents' leg at all times. So that makes it challenging to do anything that's going to make a loud noise. Sam really struggles with the like what feel like relatively normal components of the hygiene routine. They will just scream and cry like they're being murdered when their parent tries to tip them back to wash their hair, and clipping their nails sounds like they're actually trying to like cut off their fingers. Like it, they're a little bit worried that it's going to, make the neighbors concerned about what's going on with this kid in this house. Sam will only eat a few foods, and their friends, the parents' friends, were like, "Oh, don't worry about it. They'll eat when they're hungry." They will not. If a safe food is not offered to them, Sam will not eat the food that is on the plate in front of them. One time they went 24 hours without eating anything before their parent finally went, "All right, this strategy is not working. This is freaking me out. Never mind. I'll just give them something that they want to eat." And that's really tricky because like for a while Sam went through a phase where they would literally only eat ketchup. So it's not just like, oh, there's some good food options here, I just don't want to make those. It was really stressing their parents out about how to make sure that they're actually getting the nutrition that they need. As Sam got a little bit older, and goes on to a school setting for the first time, in class, Sam will kind of constantly shush the other kids, even when they are not really being loud. They're being an expected volume, or maybe the work that they're doing is that they can all talk quietly amongst their groups. Sam will still end up shushing the other students. If Sam gets a bump or a scrape or a bruise on the playground, then that's the theatrical production to shut down the next hour, because Sam needs to, for sure, go to the nurse, get a band-aid, get an ice pack, have several people comfort them about their owie, and if the recess aide or if their teacher tries to be like, "You're fine, just brush it off," then now Sam's got to dig down even harder into know how bad it actually hurts is, "I can't walk and I need to lay on the ground and I won't even be able to go in from recess." um, Sam is very bothered by other kids breaking the rules, despite kind of always having a reason why they need to be breaking the rules at that particular moment. um, and when there are like transitions in the classroom, whether major ones, such as, it's time to leave the class and go to PE, or minor ones like it's time to put down the thing that we were working on writing and pick up the thing that we're going to work on for math. Regardless of what transition it is, they are tricky for Sam, but especially when it involves transitioning out of the classroom, because Sam will pretty much always accuse somebody in line of having uh, kicked them or hit them or shoved them. And sometimes the teacher is really sure that they are standing by a peer who is not going to just haul off and shove you in line. But Sam is absolutely sure it was on purpose, it was targeted, and they pushed me. Um, Sam will throw away their entire lunch before eating something that they can't tolerate eating. They will go hungry for the whole school day rather than eat things that they can't stomach. And sometimes just the presence of something that feels gross to them on the plate next to something that they would usually be able to eat makes it impossible for them to eat the whole thing. As a teenager and on into adulthood, Sam continues to startle at unexpected noises. If a siren goes by or if somebody's dog barks while they're walking, down the street by houses, then Sam can articulate that they really don't like the way that it makes their heart kind of jump and then race, and they don't like the unsettled feeling that it gives them in their body. Sam understands that light touch, affectionate touch, somebody squeezing your shoulder or giving you a hug or ruffling your hair is usually supposed to be affectionate. But to Sam, it really just doesn't like feel that way. They no longer react, overwhelmingly if somebody does that who doesn't know them very well. But the people who do know them very well just know that Sam does not like to be touched. And it just seems like it sets their nervous system into like this racing state instead of feeling calm and settled. And Sam's family always wondered if they would grow out of some of their food aversions, but Sam just never grew into being able to eat some kinds of foods, especially gloopy foods like yogurt or mashed potatoes. Um, and so as I describe these things about Sam, it's very possible that you hear something in there, like I said, that sounded like you when you were a kid, or you now as you're an adult. It's possible you hear something that sounds like a kid you've parented or a kid that you've taught. Um, so I need you to hold Sam in your mind for a minute. We'll put Sam on a shelf and come back to them in a sec, because now I need to introduce you to Alex. At the same ages that Sam was when we looked at Sam. So Alex at 3, before ever having gone to any child care setting, um, Alex loves to know the routine of the day, even before Alex is verbal. Like as young as 1 year old, Alex likes to know what they're going to do in the day, because as long as somebody lets them know what they're going to do in the day, then okay, that's totally fine. But if there's an unexpected change, like we just realized we're out of something and we got to run to the store, or it turns out mom's not going to be available for this thing, so you're going to do it with dad. Even at 1 year old, Alex has this vibe of like, yeah, you did not file that paperwork with the office with me, and it is not going to be acceptable that we're going to be making this change last minute. I had a plan, and my plan was to play trains all day, and you are interrupting that plan. Sometimes Alex's parent feels like it's hard for them to categorize Alex, because sometimes they seem so clingy, especially if they go to an outing or there's other people around. Alex won't even let themselves be put down. They'll just like lift their legs back up so that their parent has to either like set them on their butt on the ground or keep holding them. But then sometimes Alex's parent will try to give him a hug or give him a cuddle, and Alex will like duck away from that, or seem like they're avoiding being touched. Alex makes noise to themselves pretty much constantly, and it's just like not directed at anybody. It's not even necessarily stuff with meaning. They might be singing little words to themselves, or humming, or just like keeping up an ongoing monologue as they play. It intensifies when the family goes in the car. It intensifies when they're in the grocery store or something like that. And the family has learned that it's probably just best to let Alex kind of do their little Alex monologue and not interrupt them. As Alex gets older and goes to school, they know exactly where things should go. They can tell the teacher exactly how things ought to be. They are the absolute star at keeping everybody on schedule. But on the flip side, if there's a substitute teacher for the day and the substitute dares to do read aloud time at 9:55 instead of 10 o'clock, Alex will be like, "Excuse me, That's not the way that our teacher does that. Um, Alex goes through a phase of just kind of like making a scene every single time that they are not the line leader of the class. And their teacher finally, in hopes of like assigning them a job being enough to, placate them, their teacher finally suggests that they be the permanent caboose. um, and that always be their job. And that seems like that works for them. They are content with being the back of the line always. It's like they know where to go, they know what to do, they know what's expected of them, and they are okay with that. Alex makes a lot of noise during independent work time. They will look their teacher right in the face and be like, yes, I understand we are at a voice level 0. We are working on our independent work. Everybody's working silently. And then they will get back to their desk and instantaneously be humming Disney songs as they try to work on their work. Their teacher thought about it and tried playing some piano music in the room to see if that would maybe help. And Alex sang the Disney songs louder. So didn't necessarily work as a problem solving, even though it was a very good effort on the teacher's part. As Alex becomes a teenager and goes on into adulthood, they really tend to plan their life around not having to be in situations that make them uncomfortable. So if they know exactly what time of day they can go to the shops and get the things that they need. And that's when it's less crowded and less noisy and less overwhelming. They'll just always do that. Always go to the store at 7 a.m. before I go to work or whatever it is. And a big part of that for Alex is avoiding places where they either have to stand in line for a long time or where there's going to be a crowd. They just don't go to those things. Alex tends to listen to music. They wear their headphones with them, whether they're going on the bus, whether they're at work, whether they're if their teachers are okay with it when they're at school, when they're at home working on homework. It has never distracted them. Like other people say, you can't actually multitask that well. If you're listening to music, you won't be able to focus. That has never been true for them. It always increases their ability to focus. So you might have heard elements of Alex and Sam that sounded similar to each other. Um, and you might have also noticed some of the ways in which they were different. You might have heard things that sounded like you. You might feel like I'm kind of like Alex in some ways, and I'm kind of like Sam in some ways. So again, we will hold that in your mind. And now I'm going to introduce you to Sage. There are 4 of these, by the way, so I won't just introduce you to infinite children. Sage at 3, at the same ages that Alex and Sam were, before going to any kind of childcare setting. Sage loves to make things happen. Sage is also making perpetual noise to themselves, but the noise tends to be more like meow, like just constant, active, in motion. Everything's exploding. Sage might be exploding. Um, Cars are exploding, planes are things, just exciting sound effects. If you get Sage a toy that makes noise, they'll probably love it. They'll probably make way more noise than you actually want them to. And some of the noise will be the noise that the toy default makes, and other of the noise will be what noise does the toy make if it is launched across the room at precisely this angle from precisely this couch? Does it make a different noise if dropped from the second story to the ground below on the staircase? A lot of times, if something Sage's parent felt like they'll have to eventually learn like the natural consequences of throwing their thing and dropping their thing is that it would break, and then maybe they won't do that anymore. And no, Sage was like, oh cool, an opportunity to learn about wires, and just like kept prying it open, and their parent was like, we did not take anything away from this. Sage loves water in every form, whether it's the kiddie pool out back, the hose, the bathtub, the ocean. One time Sage's family was on vacation and they were in a hotel room that didn't have a tub. It only had a shower, and they thought, Sage is a baby, like this is going to be too intense for them. But Sage was like laughing as water was running down their face, like completely unfazed. Sage never, ever, 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 ever stops moving, and getting them to sleep can be a real challenge because their parents will put them in bed and they will just pop back up and keep running around. Like you tire them out, seems like it just winds them up. What do you even do with a kid who's doing backflips and parkour and jumping off stuff and climbing up stuff when they're one, two, three, before you ever expected them to be that fast. As Sage gets a little bit older and goes on to school, Sage really struggles to focus on what their teacher is saying if there is something more interesting to look at. And in a kindergarten classroom, there is literally always something more interesting to look at because there are 30 little people and they are all in motion, and many of them are doing more interesting things than talking about phonics or whatever. Um, Sage touches everything. Their teacher will re-emphasize, like, we're all going to keep our hands to our sides or behind our backs when we're walking in the hallway. And Sage is like, and then they're running a hand down the hallway as they, and touching literally everybody's art project and every texture that they possibly can. Sage fiddles and fidgets with everything, everywhere, always, which is how they accidentally unraveled an inch and a half of the rug during circle time before anybody noticed what it was that they were doing. Sage touches their peers more than their peers want to be touched, and not in like a inappropriate way, just like patting them on the shoulder or trying to give them a high five, like things that are even friendly. But a lot of times or running up and giving them a hug, but a lot of times the peer is like, I wanted more space than that. Sage asks the teacher a million questions and like has to get up out of their chair and run up to the teacher and be like standing right next to them in order to ask them this question. And sometimes their teacher legitimately cannot tell if they're using it as an excuse to get out of their seat or if they're like really asking a question about this thing that they just asked and they just don't remember. It's really hard for their teacher to parse out. As Sage gets older, as a teenager and on into adulthood, they continue to just be this joyful, over the top, enthusiastic, thrill seeking person. They love going to an amusement park for their birthday and riding all of the rides. And they were never like excellent at any particular sport, but they tried all of them and they loved all of them. And they were the fastest runner when they were supposed to run and do drills for, practicing for soccer or football. Sage also never seemed like they grew out of being really touchy feely. They've got younger siblings and they still want to cuddle and roughhouse with them. And Sage and their friends will all like jump on each other's back or, like fake wrestle with each other the way that teens and, big kids do. And even though their parents are not as touchy feely of people, so they don't feel like Sage got it from them, they do find it charming, and it's sweet that Sage is still like really affectionate with their younger siblings. In my experience, people who have a Sage as a kid of their own or as a kid that they're working with are most likely to have come to OT for help because Sage's adults are the most likely to be like, what do I do with this? Like, what do I do with this kid? So Sage shares some things in common with Alex, and then Sage also shares some things in common with the fourth kid who I'm going to talk with you about, which is Morgan. At 3, Morgan is content, happy. They were a super happy baby. They almost seem like lost in their own world, but in like a happy way, not really in like a disconnected way. Their parent can step out of the room to go put stuff in the dryer or go prep lunch or whatever, and Morgan just like is so involved in their own independent play that they don't even seem like they notice. And so their parent is like, should I warn them? Should I just sneak away? Like, this is unexpected for a kid to not even seem like they're noticing. On the flip side, if Morgan's parent is like, hey, can you go put your shoes on so we can go to the park? Then if the parent does not follow Morgan to the shoes and ensure the shoes getting on, then 90% of the time Morgan will be playing with something that was on the way to the shoes or playing with a shoe or holding a shoe and staring out the window because it's like once they were out of eyesight of their parents, they forgot what it was they were doing. Their brain went off to something else, something more interesting. Morgan bumps into everything. Morgan will run full tilt into a door frame of a door that has been the same door since they were a kid. They've never like moved to a new house and their eyes were open and nothing was in the way and they'll just run into it. And Morgan's parent was feeling worried about the fact that they were ending up with bruises and stuff like that. Mentioned it to their pediatrician, like worried like, maybe Morgan has some like vision difficulties or something like that. But they screened all of that out and the doctor was like, Morgan's probably just kind of a clumsy person. Morgan's parent finally put together like a pattern that was coming up over and over, which was that when they were at the playground, Morgan would only play in the shaded areas. And it took a while to figure this out because sometimes they would go to the playground at 9 a.m. and sometimes they would go at 1 p.m. and the sun would be in different places. So it would be like, why is Morgan refusing to do anything other than the slide today? Or why is Morgan only on the swing? Like, what does this have to do with it? Finally, their parent figured out that when Morgan's in the sun, in the bright sun, then Morgan seems like they're super uncomfortable. They'll just be like squinting and like, or like covering their head or covering their eyes. And so they just like were default playing in the shade. So Morgan's parent buys them a sun hat and it's like instantly solved. Now Morgan can access the entire playground. They don't seem like they even knew that that was what it was that was bothering them. As Morgan gets a little bit older and goes on to school, Morgan doesn't seem to notice that whole class directions also mean them. If their teacher's like, can everybody get out your science journals? Morgan will just like sit there happily until their teacher's like, Morgan, can you get out your science journal? Um, Morgan literally falls out of their chair onto the floor, like repeatedly throughout the day. And then Morgan's teacher looks online and finds this occupational therapist's Facebook page and thinks that maybe trying like a wobble chair might help. And then Morgan falls out of their chair like 18 times more per day than what they were doing before. And Morgan's teacher is like, that occupational therapist doesn't know anything. What are they talking about? Um, Morgan is really good at math, but when they are doing a math worksheet, they are prone to leaving half of the page blank and unfinished. And if their teacher comes over and asks them, like, do you know this plus this? They will answer easily. If their teacher points out the questions to them, they'll be like, oh, yeah, totally, and fill those ones out. And if their teacher highlights them for them ahead of time, then they'll maybe get half of them or so. But otherwise, without some kind of intervention, Morgan will literally just leave half the thing blank. And everybody's a little bit worried about that for standardized testing. Um, as Morgan gets older and moves on into adulthood, Morgan has noticed about themselves that they seem to be a little bit slower to catch on to jokes. When the conversation shifts, they feel like they're always maybe like a sentence behind. Um, uh, they wonder if they say what to things that people are asking more often than other people do because it seems like they just didn't catch what somebody said like literally more often than other people do. um Morgan is has never grown out of being clumsy. Their friends have a joke about the fact that they can like trip going up the stairs and they've always got a bruise that they don't know where it came from. um there's another joke that Morgan is really easy to startle because you can not have any intent on sneaking up on them. You literally just walk into a room and be like, hey, Morgan, what are you doing? And they'll like jump out of their skin. Like they 100% didn't know you were there, didn't hear you, and have this really active startle reflex. When Morgan tries to go new places, they have a really hard time following the directions for that. And they like pretty much just rely on their GPS to tell them step by step, literally turn her body to the right and walk this way now. Okay, now turn your body to the left and walk this way now. And so when they were in the high school, the big high school instead of their smaller middle school and elementary school, then they had a really hard time with getting to their classes on time, even classes that they had been to before, because they struggled to remember where they were. So now we've got four kids: Sam, Alex, Sage, and Morgan. And maybe there was something in there that sounded like you. Maybe you were feeling like, okay, well, I feel like Sage when it comes to movement, but I feel like Alex when it comes to noise. And all of those are normal ways for kind of different sensory processing profiles to blend with one another. When I'm talking about sensory processing, then I'm talking about the five senses that you obviously probably learned when you were a kid in school about your sight, your hearing, your touch, taste, and smell. But I am also talking about some bonus senses, and I'm going to give just like a real little touch on what the bonus senses are because otherwise I'll talk about them for an hour and a half and then we'll be not where we were supposed to be with this one. Um, but your vestibular sense is your inner ear sense of balance and movement. It comes from liquid that's inside it. Well, and it's complicated. But if you picture liquid that's inside of your ear, if you picture a little tiny cup of water in there, anything you do that makes that water slosh around is going to be giving you vestibular movement. So, really anything that moves your head, but especially things that are rhythmic, like spinning, swaying, swinging, rolling, flipping, going upside down, those things all give you strong vestibular sensory input. Then there's proprioceptive sensory input. Proprioception is the sense that tells your body where it's at in space. And it is so if touch is felt by the nerves in your skin that can tell whether someone is touching you or something is touching you. Proprioception is got receptors, nerves that are in your muscles and in your joints that feel deeper squeeze. And make sense of that deeper feeling from in your muscles and in your joints to create a body map of where your body's at in space. So that I can close my eyes and still touch my nose because I know how long my arms are, how long my fingers are, where my fingers are at, even if I'm not using my vision to see them. Interoception is making meaning out of the sensations that you experience in your body. I could say making sense out of your senses, which isn't a particularly helpful definition, but making meaning out of the things that you feel, such as it can be emotional or biological. An example of biological would be I feel my stomach rumbling or I feel my head getting lightheaded and dizzy. I know that means that I'm hungry. An example of emotional would be I feel my hands being hot and sweaty. I know that means I'm anxious, or I feel my throat starting to close up. I know that means that I'm like sad or feeling anxiety about this conversation that I'm having or whatever it is. Interoception is the process of being aware of those signals and then turning them into some kind of meaning for yourself. So when we look at the sensory processing styles, so we're talking about, those are the senses we're talking about. Then everybody has a sensory processing style. And I wish that I had done this in pieces because sometimes I have an animation that works, but it doesn't seem like it did, where it shows these components all at once because I know it's really, or one at a time because I know it's really overwhelming to see it all at once. So actually, if I can annotate, I actually think I can. So this line and this line, just look at those for a second. So the line going up and down is from a low tolerance to a high tolerance for sensory input. That one is fairly intuitive to understand. If you have a low tolerance for sensory input, then it doesn't take much to bother you. If you have a high tolerance for sensory input, then it doesn't take, there's a lot of room before it starts bothering you. I put tolerance / threshold because there's kind of this complicated additional factor where sometimes the tolerance or the threshold at which you notice sensory input is the same as the tolerance, the level at which it bothers you. Probably I would not be able to do any amount of scratching my nails on a chalkboard before it would bother you. As soon as you noticed it, it would bother you. But on the other flip side, then sometimes the threshold and the tolerance are not exactly the same. If I played you your favorite music, you would be like, oh, cool, I've noticed this, but it's not bothering me. If I blasted you your favorite music at like, maximum volume out of a, mega speaker directly into your eardrums, there would be a point at which it would bother you despite being your favorite music because the sensory input had become so overwhelming that even though it crossed your threshold a long time ago, now it has also crossed your tolerance. So that is what the tolerance and threshold are. Then if you look at the one from the left to the right that talks about passive to active, that's talking about strategies for getting your needs met. So active strategies for getting your needs met is exactly what it sounds like. You do things that try to get your needs met. I don't love the word passive, and I usually use the word environmental instead, but the person who invented this uses passive. I substitute it with environmental. Passive to me sounds like you just sit there and don't do anything and you don't let anything happen. And I don't love that kind of concept of it. Environmental suggests to me people who use environmental strategies to get their needs met tend to like their life to be set up in such a way that it works for them, or their adults to help them set up their life in such a way that it works for them. And when it deviates from that norm of what works for them, that's when they have a hard time because they don't necessarily have the active strategies to like change stuff day by day or minute by minute that somebody with active strategies has. And so that's why it can sometimes look passive. But what it actually is just that they're used to having their environment set up right. And when they're out of that environment, that's when it's hard for them. So we will go through these. Is it going to leave the plus on there? It is. Shoot. Sorry. How do I turn that off? Maybe with an eraser. Oh, there's a delete button. Okay. There we go. Look at that. Learning how to zoom in 2025 as if we don't all super know. So again, going back to Sam, Alex, Sage, and Morgan, then I wonder whether you can picture which child it is who would go. Oh, look, I gave it away. Sorry, I thought there was one more slide. Okay, the child who uses active strategies to get their needs met and who has a high tolerance or threshold for what that sensory input would be is very obviously Sage. Sage is loud, over the top, in constant motion. Sensory input does not bother them, even surprising sensory input like water getting in their face. They are actively seeking it out all the time, every minute, and they're not just relying on environmental strategies to keep it set up for them. They're like every hour, every minute doing exactly the thing that feels like it would be what would meet their needs right then. In the cute one over to the side with the mugs that's drawn by doing therapy, which I love, then they're called the tall mug. And it says, big cup, let's fill it up. Thrives in sensory rich settings. Steals your pen, clicks your pen, breaks your pen, dismantles your pen. So that is an example that another artist drew of what a mug would be like if it was a sensory seeker, like Sage is. So you might be able to think then somebody else who's active about getting their needs met, but who's the opposite, who has a low tolerance and a low threshold for what sensory input that it is that bothers them or that they need. Think in your mind for a second which one of the kids it would be that you think would fit into that sensory avoiders category. If you guessed Alex, then you are correct. Sensory avoiding Alex. The cute version one with the little mugs calls it a little teacup and says, small cup, says when pretty fast, as in like, tell me, say when I'm pouring it in. Loves routine, insightful about own needs, and shh. Alex did a lot of things minute to minute, hour to hour in order to keep their sensory needs met, whether that was clinging to their parent because they're in one kind of environment or pushing their parent away because they're in another. Whether that was avoiding going to things that they know are going to be noisy, avoiding being jostled in line. When Alex was really struggling with wanting to always be first in line, it would be easy for their teacher to think that they were being dramatic or that they don't know how to share with the other kids or that they think the whole world revolves around them or, whatever other stories it is that we tell ourselves. But Alex was having a hard time with being bumped by other kids in line. And if they were at the front of the line, they don't get bumped as much. They've only got a kid in one direction instead of in two, ideally, and realistically, sometimes three and four, the way that children walk in a line. And so when their teacher came up with a solution for them to be the permanent caboose, their teacher thought that they were answering a social emotional need or a need to always have a job or something like that. And they unintentionally, but successfully, also met the sensory need of at the back of the line. Alex also only has kids in one direction. And even better, Alex can see the kids in the direction that they're in. And so Alex can just kind of hang back. Nobody can bump them or bother them. So a kid who has a lot of similarities to Alex with also having a really low tolerance or low threshold for sensory input, but more passive or more environmental strategies for getting their needs met was sensory sensitive Sam. Sam, a lot of times the distinction between sensory sensitive and sensory avoider is not entirely necessary to know exactly, does this fit into exactly this category, does this fit into exactly the other category, because like you can use strategies for everybody just based on what it is that you're finding hard for them, and not based on like the naming stuff is to help us understand it, but it doesn't like do anything pragmatically speaking. But a lot of times the clearest time that I see difference is in babies or very, very young children before they can talk. A lot of times, a sensory sensitive person will seem sensitive in the just like colloquial word of it. And a lot of times, a sensory avoidant kid will seem, the word that gets used for toddlers is particular. Almost as if a particular kid or a sensory avoidant kid has a sense of like, there is a right way to be doing things. And if everybody would consult with me, despite the fact that I'm a baby and I can't talk, I would tell you what it is the right way to do this that would make it, not terrible. Whereas a sensory sensitive kid might just kind of have a sense of like, things are bad and I don't know why, because they kind of rely harder on those environmental strategies. As you get older, you get better at setting those up for yourself, but especially as a kid, it's really hard to set up your own environment. Like you don't know what you can do, you don't have the tools, you may or may not be listened to by your adults. Oh, the drawing says small hand built mug, little cup, prone to overflow, notices everything, can feel the tag in a shirt while someone else is wearing it. um Then the last one on my list, the last one to fill in my map, is of course Sensory Mr. Morgan, who on the mug drawing is the big chill vessel. Big cup, can't be bothered filling it. Easily overlooks sensory info. Good at focusing. And where did that bruise come from? In my experience, sensory missers are the most likely to themselves be missed. Although that's not why they're called that. It's called that because they're literally missing sensory input that other people don't miss. But in my experience, that also leads to the kids sometimes being missed because they if they aren't having actual academic like measurable problems like falling behind in reading or seriously falling behind in math or whatever it is, then they will often look content. They've kind of got this sense almost of like, well, the like most valuable thing I can do is to like sit here and be quiet and not bother anybody. And so, they might just be happily sitting there and not understanding what's being asked of them, or not understanding what the worksheet actually wants, and therefore not being able to show everything that they know. But it might not be being noticed that that's for sensory reasons. Everybody's brain filters out some sensory input. Before I say it, you're probably not thinking super hard about the feeling of your chair or couch against your bottom or backside, and exactly how that feels. And you're probably not thinking about the visual location of literally everything in your room because your brain knows that it can safely filter those things out. Those are familiar things. They're not changing. You know where they are. And so like brains save energy by not processing every single thing in your environment every single second because that would be extremely overwhelming and use all of your resources. Sensory missers have a brain that is also filtering things out. It's just filtering out more things than other people. And so somebody calling Morgan's name, they might not even hear them because their brain is filtering that out. So uh, it is important to remember that real life is more complicated than this. Um, uh, Somebody can fit into different boxes for different senses, like I am avoidant of noise, but I am seeking movement. Somebody can fit into kind of different boxes at different times of the day. Like when I wake up in the morning, I'm pretty much in the sensory missing category. Nothing's bothering me. And then I kind of like slide down over the course of the day and I am sensitive by the evening. Um, like I already mentioned, tolerance and threshold may not be exactly the same. But they might. Sometimes you might the point at which you notice the sensory input is also the point at which it bothers you, but sometimes those points are different. And then like globally, there's a little bit of a notice of a slide from passive to active across the lifespan. But I have a theory that this has less to do with the sensory profiles actually changing and more to do with the autonomy that we give grownups versus the autonomy that we give kids. because a lot of times kids aren't allowed to do the active strategies that would help them. And so if it seems like, oh wow, adults just have more active strategies by the time they grow up, it seems to me that that has less to do with somebody's processing style changing and more to do with what they can do in their life changing. This comes back to a really important point, which is that people's sensory processing styles don't go away. Um, and this is important because of my own profession, in addition to others. But like in the field of occupational therapy, we used to try to desensitize people to sensory input. Now, desensitization to things like phobias and anxiety is a legitimate practice in the field of psychology. But desensitizing people's sensory systems really doesn't happen. Sometimes people can decide of their own volition entirely that they want to explore whether it's possible for them to tolerate a certain sensory input. I'm a very, very sensory avoidant person. I hate the feeling of dry sand, but I still go to the beach. I know how to deal with it. I know that I won't be able to wear shoes after I've walked in the sand, like at all, any kind of shoes. I know that the faster I get to something that can rinse me off, the better. So I keep a water bottle in the car so that I can pour it on my feet and, be done with the sand after the beach. Um, so people can try to do things to cope or to help themselves, but I didn't desensitize myself to it. I didn't stick my feet in dry sand over and over and over until I was not distressed. That doesn't help. And that's something that OT literally used to do is be like, okay, we've got this kid. When they touch something slimy, they gag and cry and throw up. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have them come to OT and touch slimy things over and over and over and over and over until one day they don't gag and cry and throw up. Cool, we've desensitized them, but we haven't. We've taught them how to channel that into something else, maybe how to dissociate from their body, maybe how to think as hard as you possibly can about something else instead of the sensation that you're experiencing, maybe how to squash all of your emotions until later when you blow up about something else and your family doesn't realize that it had to do with that. Because all we've really taught them is the grown-ups are not safe. They're going to keep making you do things that make your body feel horrendous. And so I always have to mention people's sensory processing styles don't go away. The way people process sensory input now is similar to the way that they will process it for their whole entire lifetime. So Sam's there are examples in all of the kids, but I'll just only give the example of Sam. Sam was sensitive to noises when they were a kid. They didn't like the vacuum. They didn't like the blender. They didn't like the fire drill as a child. They didn't like other people startling them. And as an adult and as an adolescent, they still startled to unexpected noise or to sirens going by. Sam was sensitive to touch, hygiene and grooming as a toddler, injuries or unexpectedly being brushed in the line as a child, being touched even affectionately as an adult. Sensitive to foods, many foods as a toddler, and then some foods at the school lunch as a child, and then they could narrow it down to specific textures as an adult. So Sam grew into being able to better advocate what it is that they could say. They had more opportunities, they had more people who would believe them, they had more autonomy over their life to buy the kinds of foods that they know they could eat. But Sam's sensory profile didn't change. So when I talk about the kids and things that they do, Alex singing in class during silent work time, is this a behavior? The way that behavior often gets used as a euphemism for just misbehavior? Or is this a childish attempt to meet a sensory need? Alex is sensory avoidant. Alex is hearing a different noise that is bothering them. They may or may not be aware that they're hearing a different noise that's bothering them. It could be something that other people can hear, like pencils scritching as their neighbors are trying to write stuff on their paper. It could be something that other people can't hear. I worked with a child who could hear the electricity in outlets. It took us a really long time to figure that one out because none of us could hear the electricity in outlets. And if their seat was by an outlet, they had a 10 times harder time in their school day and would make excuses to get out of their chair over and over, to go to the bathroom, to go get water, to go sharpen their pencil, to go everything so that they wouldn't have to be sitting by it anymore. It's a childish attempt to meet a sensory need. It's not a bad behavior. Alex is trying to actively avoid auditory input that they don't like. What about Sage? Sage is bouncing off the walls, runs into the kitchen where dad's cooking. Dad shoos him out, starts climbing on mom while she's trying to help little sister read her book. accidentally knocks over a lamp with their foot, falls into baby brother's block tower. They're just like leaving a trail of chaos and destruction wherever they go. Um, and is this behavior, or is this a childish attempt to meet a sensory need? Sage is trying to actively seek proprioceptive and vestibular input, or I would say proprioceptive and vestibular. Me from when I made this slideshow. Sage is doing things that shake up their inner ear. Sage is doing things that maybe go upside down, that give them all sorts of movement, that give them lots of bumping into stuff, crashing into stuff, because their body is actively trying to make a map of where it's at in space and make sense of what it is and what it can do, because growing bodies are constantly doing that. And Sage can feel this need inside of them. They very likely aren't able to express this need, because that's a very convoluted, thing to be able to express. And Sage is just doing what they can to make that happen. What about Sam? Sam's at the park and building a sandcastle, and another kid walks up behind them, puts their hand on Sam's shoulder, and leans over to say, "What's that?" And suddenly Sam just shoves them to the ground. Is this a behavior, or is this a childish attempt to meet a sensory need? Sam's sensory system got defensive when they were touched, when there was really close proximity to them, when they were startled. They probably didn't hear the other kid walk up. They got both startled and touched at the same time, and so they reacted like you would if something startling touched you all of a sudden. Sam is trying to defend against tactile or touch input. It's rooted in their sensory system. It's not rooted in them just being bad or just making bad choices or using unkind hands or not being kind to our friends. Now, not every reason is a sensory reason. I'm sometimes accused of thinking that every single thing in the whole entire world is sensory, and there are quite a lot of things that are sensory related, but there are other reasons why things happen: social, emotional, maturity, developmental. Somebody in the situation is missing some kind of information. This is a graphic from PlaySpark, and it's free on their website. So if it resonates with you, then you can get it for free. I know that the younger a kid is, the more likely something is to be sensory related, because the blue stripe on this pyramid is the sensory systems. When babies are born, they kind of start at the purple stripe. They start with the central nervous system and then grow upward. And so you've got to, you immediately start developing your sensory system, but it's not developed when you're first born. You can't make sense yet of what is sound, what is sight, what is everything. So it starts growing, you develop your sensory systems, and then you start developing sensory motor, and then you start developing perceptual motor, and then cognitive intellect. Behavior is up there at the top. Academic learning is up there at the top. Activities of daily living, that means your self-care things, the things that you got to do every day, like eat and sleep and get dressed and, brush your teeth. Those things are all up there at the top. You've got to have so much foundation underneath them. And so the younger a kid is, when somebody is telling me they're just doing this to be manipulative, they're just doing this because it's bad behavior, you think everything is sensory. The younger that they are, I know that it is more likely to be sensory, because their sensory system is literally still developing. And so more of the things that they do in a day are going to be rooted in that, because their brain and their body is trying to develop that. When you're trying to be a behavior detective and figure out what the reason is why a kid might have done something, it can be hard. Like, that's literally my job. So I'm not saying like just be an OT next, but a quick shorthand that you can use if you are trying to understand, okay, could there be a sensory reason why this kid is doing this thing that is driving me up a wall? Ask yourself whether what the child is doing causes there to be more or less of one of the senses. Does it cause there to be more to look at, more to hear, more to smell, more to taste, more to touch, more movement, more feeling what's going on inside of them, more physical pressure, more exertion of their muscles? Does it cause there to be less of one of those things, less visual overwhelm, less noise, and so on? That can give you a clue. It may or may not be right, but it can give you a problem-solving direction that is more productive than, well, the kid just needs to stop it. They just need to behave right. This can help you understand what could potentially be, okay, if they're doing something to get more to touch, then is there a different way that I can give them more to touch? I don't know why Sage is running their hands along everything that we walk by in the hallways as we try to go to our next class. But maybe if I give them a fidget that they hold with their hands and it's got lots of different textures on it, maybe that will meet the need that they are showing me for more textures. Maybe I'm not an expert in textures or touch or hands or nerves or receptors or why or what that's doing in the brain. But if I can believe that Sage is trying to do something to meet a need in a childish way, and then I try to meet the need in a way that better works for the whole team, then I'm at least listening to them. I'm at least giving it a try. There are lots of things that you do in your day-to-day life for sensory reasons. And there are lots of things that you do that kids just don't have the same privilege. People rely really heavily on feel-good strategies, preemptively meeting your needs throughout the day. So a lot of stuff I see with social emotional learning is focused on what you do when you're already kind of hitting a crisis point. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about literally just things people do throughout the day to meet their needs. You don't wake up in the morning and go, okay, it's time for me to have the grossest coffee from the store made, and I'm going to drink it out of my least favorite mug. I'm going to stir it with the spoon that feels like it's too big for my mouth. I'm not going to add the things to it that I like. And then I'm going to drive to work in absolute silence, even though I would like to listen to music. I'm going to park in the parking spot that's the furthest away from the building. And then I'm going to walk carrying my heavy bag. No, like you do things that make you feel good. You literally do. It's not, it doesn't have anything to do with, it's not moral. It's not, it's just, you just do things that make you feel good throughout the day. Adults can typically stand up or walk around or stretch when we need to move often. I know that, these things aren't necessarily true literally 100% of the time, but often. Adults can often jiggle their leg or twirl their pen or chew gum when they need to fidget. I'm actively fidgeting the entire time I'm doing a lecture. I've got like a pile of fidgets here and I've dropped 3 of them and I just keep picking up another one and keep going. Adults can go to the bathroom again, typically when they need to. I understand that sometimes you can't just leave your class and go to the bathroom, but you can usually make arrangements to have gone to the bathroom when you needed to. And adults can typically eat a snack or made arrangements to have eaten a snack when you're hungry. Adults can typically put down a task that's frustrating to them and take a break in a lot of settings. If something is frustrating you, there is usually not somebody standing right over your shoulder being like, do it, no, keep doing it. Adults can often text a friend or joke with a coworker or rant or vent about something that's stressing them out without people policing the emotion that they're having or displaying, unless you're talking to somebody who kind of sucks. So, don't talk to better people. Adults can typically adjust the sensory demands of their environment. They can often put on music or turn it off. They can often turn on lights or off lights to adjust it to what feels comfortable to them. Adults can often, if you're in a meeting or something like that, doodle or daydream or be afforded the privilege to look like you're not paying attention without somebody actively calling you out and being like, are you paying attention to this? Adults can keep favorite treats kind of on hand to like choose to like reward themselves when they want to. I can eat chocolate if I want to eat chocolate. I can just decide that for myself and nobody is in charge of me about it. But a lot of these things get used as rewards or motivators or get taken away as punishment for kids uh in like that's when they're not just like literally just not accessible to them because of the way the life is set up. Like sometimes there's active adult intervention in giving it or taking it away, and then sometimes just like kids just don't have access to that stuff. So the same, if you don't know what things you usually do to keep yourself feeling good throughout a day, then the same shorthand that helps with being a behavior detective is also really good shorthand for finding feel good strategies. Try out something that causes there to be more of stuff. Try out something that causes there to be less of stuff. See if it makes you feel good. See if it makes you feel bad. Don't do it again if it makes you feel bad. Like this all sounds extremely basic, but a lot of us didn't really get this kind of explanation when we were a kid. And we have to kind of know it ourselves before we can even pass it on to a kid. Everybody does things all day long to try to make themselves feel more comfortable in their bodies. Grown-ups do it, kids do it, everybody does it. Kids have less knowledge of everybody else's needs in the room. Kids have less knowledge of social propriety. Kids have less dignity sometimes. And so they might be doing it in ways that are inconvenient or in ways that seem unusual or things like that. But everybody is doing the same thing. Everybody is trying to make themselves more comfortable in their bodies, both overtly and instinctually. So a lot of times kids will express their own meaning that they've derived interoception, you remember, is meaning you've derived from a sensation inside of you. A lot of times kids will express their own interoception and it will just be shut down like right away. Like, no, you're not hungry. You just ate food. Oh, it's okay. You're not hurt. You can't still be sad about that after the kid has just tried to stop just doing it with their behavior and instead do it with their words. Tell you the thing it is that they think that they're sensing or that they think that they're feeling or that they're making sense out of. So like the whole rest of this talk was like how we do it with our behavior, and then this is like when you try to do it with your words, and then even when kids try to do it with their words, sometimes their grown-ups will still shut them down. And instead, what we need to do is believe them, whether we think they're right or not. Verbally believe them. Wow, you are still hungry? Or, oh no, it looks like that really hurt. Or that was really sad for you, huh? And then use language explaining what cues it is that we would use to interpret what it is that we think we see with them. I see that you're eating way, way, way slower. Are you still hungry, or does it just really, really taste so good? And then in throughout, like not just like right then, but like throughout our lives, model interpreting our own cues out loud. Oh my gosh, my mouth is loving eating this food, but my belly says I need to be done, so I'm gonna have to put it away. I know I can always eat more later. Or like, ooh, I bumped into that and it didn't really hurt, but it did startle my brain. Like that, I really like yelled ow, but I guess I was just startled. Or I am feeling just like really slow today and really sluggish, and it's like it makes my body feel like it's sad. I don't even know why I feel sad. Nothing happened. As we're describing these things about ourselves and as we're validating the ones that our kids um, say, even if they say it imperfectly, it's a baby skill. It's growing. It's growing just like all their other skills learn to grow. And you don't grow a skill by shutting it down, because what that does is either tell our kids that they need to doubt their own experience, which doesn't help the skill grow, or that they need to dig down deeper and really, really insist that they've really for sure got it, because otherwise they won't be believed and you can't be trusted to believe them, which also doesn't grow the skill because now they're just frozen because they feel like they need to just insist, insist, insist to be heard. At the end of this kind of section of this talk, I hope that you can hear how the question is no longer like, this kid is doing this thing, how do I stop this behavior? But rather, what is the underlying need that this kid is expressing with this behavior or with these words, even childish words? And how could we work together to meet it? So that's half of it. We're going to have a little breakout session, and it kind of goes half from the last one, and then if you have time and you want to talk about the bonus one, then half from the next one. But at least, what's an example of a way that a child acted in your class that now you think you can understand or identify what the sensory reason for that was? And then if you have time or you want to, can you think of any time when you think a kid was acting in a specific way because of a sensory reason? But the problem is that it was setting off somebody else's sensory system and their sensory reason. That was what made it into a problem.
Thank you so much, Kelsie. I'm wondering if we can take a quick 5-minute break here. That'll give
Absolutely.
folks some time to process the questions and also just take care of their needs. And then when we come back in 5 minutes, we'll send everybody to breakout sessions.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks everybody. So just come on back here at what time is this? 4:07 at 4:12.
All right. So I'm going to jump right into sensory mismatch because I need to get through a lot of stuff in a little bit of time. So when I talk about sensory mismatch, I'm going to give you two examples first. So Aiden and Luna are in the same class. These are all based on actual situations. Aiden and Luna are two students in the same class. Luna is highly sensitive to noise, especially repetitive noises. Aiden makes noise to stim, self-regulate, and focus. Who gets their way? Whose sensory needs get met? They are literally at odds. Like it seems like an actual impossibility. Another example I'll give you. Summer and Apollo are two children in the same house. Summer wants all the lights on in the playroom, including the twinkle lights and the disco ball, or else she says she can't see. Apollo wants all the lights off in the playroom and the curtain drawn over the window, or else he says it's too bright. Who gets their way? Whose sensory needs get met? When there is a sensory mismatch, how can we possibly meet everybody's needs when they've got literally opposite opposing needs and multiplied by however else many kids are in the classroom? How are we supposed to meet those needs? The grown-ups in each scenario might end up deciding, like Aiden and Luna's teacher is also annoyed by the noise, so she tells Aiden he has to stop. Or Summer and Apollo's mom is also dizzied by the disco ball, and so she decides we'll have the lights off today. Speaking of sensory mismatch, does everybody mind checking whether their microphone is muted when they came back from the breakout session? Just for my own brain to focus on what I'm doing. And so the grown-ups are a part of the team, and the grown-up sensory needs are a part of the consideration. Like there are at least 3 people in each of these scenarios that I described, because there's Aiden and Luna, and then there's whoever their teacher is, and there's Summer and Apollo, and whoever their parent is. But you may be able to guess from the last whole section, I don't think that grown-ups should just be the deciding factor just because they are the grown-up and for no other reason. Like the problem solving should not just stop at, well, I'm the biggest and the noise is annoying me, so stop. Like there has to at least, that still might be the same problem solution might be what actually legit ends up being what you come to. But there has to be more reasoning behind it than just, I want to do what's comfortable for me, if we're going to be like respecting children as whole entire human beings themselves. So some of the senses that we have already talked about affect others by proxy, and some of the senses only affect others if you seek them out. What I mean by that is that if I am eating chocolate and you hate chocolate, you do not also taste it. It is not a sense that affects you by proxy. There is not a sensory mismatch. I am eating a snack. Okay, like I didn't foist that on you. I'm not putting chocolate into your mouth. But some senses do affect others by proxy, regardless of whether you also engaged in them or not. So if I am making something visual be in a room, then most likely that will be affecting you by proxy if you're also in the room and you're not like doing something else. Or maybe if you are doing something else and I'm being distracting. Vision is one that tends to be a proxy sense. Hearing is one that tends to be a proxy sense. If I make a noise in a room and you're also in the room, you also probably hear it. And I have caused you to also experience that sensation just by you being around me. Smell is the other one that's often a common proxy sense. And so then there can also be situations in which the sense is actually different. So a kid who is seeking proprioception, movement, is moving around in such a way that they are causing visual distraction. So even though they didn't cause proprioception to somebody else, they caused visual distraction to somebody else because vision is the proxy sense. So one way that you can sometimes quick shorthand solve a sensory mismatch is, can we make the proxy senses into a personal sense? Just like I can eat something and that's a personal sense, it's not a proxy sense, and you're not bothered by it, you can eat a different thing. Is there a way for me to take this sound that this kid is hearing and turn it into a personal sense? Is there a way for me to take this sight that this kid is seeing and turn it into a personal sense? The very obvious hearing one is headphones. And of course, it can get more complicated than that because, then you start adding in other factors like, okay, well, kid A needs noise, but kid B hates noise. So kid A can wear headphones, but kid A hates pressure on their ears, so they can't wear headphones. So that maybe kid B can wear headphones so they don't hear the like. Yes, it gets into more layers of complication. I'm saying that sometimes this is a very, very easy first step that makes it like, snap, you just solved it, super tiny and easy, is to think, is this a personal sense or a proxy sense? Can I turn a proxy sense into a personal sense? Another example of a time when that actually worked is that we were visiting Florida where my parents live, and we wanted to go on like a little boat tour thing, and the dock smelled very much like fish. And my kid couldn't handle the dock smelling very much like fish. And the boat out on the ocean wasn't going to smell that way. We just needed to survive for like 15 minutes until our boat was ready. But smell is a proxy sense. The fact that fish were around made it smell like fish and that fishermen had caught them and things like that. And so we created a personal sense for my son to override that by we had peppermint breath spray and we just like gave him the bottle and he just like sniffed it for like 15 minutes. It's a little bit unusual of a way to solve that, but we created a personal sense to override the proxy sense. Or if there had been a guy standing nearby with fish and we had been like, could you stand further away? Or if we stood further away, then that would be another way to change the proxy sense into a personal sense. It's not always that easy. Um, so when I think about managing sensory mismatch in theory, then the number one most important thing, if you never get any further than problem solving than this, the number one most important thing that I teach kids, that I teach grown-ups, that I teach everybody is that there has to be a way for the person to safely escape from the sense that is bothering them. This goes back to what I was talking about, where people's sensory processing styles stay consistent over their lifespan, and there's not a way to force desensitize somebody to some sense that is bothering them. There's not a way to do that. All you can really do is like torture them. So that's not the problem solving that we're going to land on. So we're going to start with there has to be a way to safely escape. You are immediately like, but they're in my classroom, they can't escape. Good news, escape doesn't have to mean completely physically leaving. When I talk about escape, I am talking about a really broad definition of it. It can mean straight up leave the building. It can mean straight up leave the room. It can also mean leave the area of the room or get into a small enclosed space that feels protective to you, or put on headphones or earplugs, or say no, or demonstrate no with your body and your behavior. Let somebody know that whatever the way that this sense is working or is happening is not working for you right now. Here are some examples with kind of a template sentence at the beginning. I say these sentences in my house, in my job, in my life and work constantly, where I'm reminding the bothered kid what it is that they can do to access safe escape. When we are blank, if blank, then you can blank is kind of the template that I use. So when we are in OT, if that kid is making a noise that you don't like, then you can ask him to stop. Put on your headphones, go to the other side of the room, listen to the music speaker, whatever it is that is actually the thing that would help with that. Because I'm reminding the kid that they can be a partner in their own problem solving instead of just like that I need to like swoop in and solve it for them. When we are playing together, if you don't like the sound you hear, you can get your headphones out of the backpack. When we are at our house, if you don't want to play running around with your sister, you can always go play in a different spot. When we are getting ready for bed together, if you don't want people to be in your space, you can always say, go out of my room, and then actually honor that thing that they are doing to escape from the situation that it is that is triggering them. And so, only offer them ones that make sense for the situation that you're in and that are actually meeting the goals of everybody in the room. This is not the last step in problem solving. This is the first step in problem solving. So if you're feeling like, but everybody can't just escape from the stuff that we're doing all the time, yeah, I totally get that. This isn't the last step that we do. But it's a really, really important first step for nervous systems to be able to feel safe. If you told me that I was going to be stuck in a room with things that were sensorily distressing to me for 8 hours a day, for 5 days a week, for the next 12 years of my life, I would lose it. Like I can't do that. I need to know that I can ever get away from it. That literally feels like forever. I did the math one time and it's like 10,500 hours. Like that literally feels like forever before I would be able to escape from this thing that it is that's bothering me. So you can't be like the escape is at the end when you no longer have to be in a classroom anymore. There has to be something built in that the kid can rely on when they are actually in crisis or in distress. And then you build more skills from there. But that's the first step for somebody to even be able to feel safe or trust you that the skills that you're suggesting are going to make any sense. That's why I include demonstrate no with your body and behavior really strongly on this list, because sometimes, especially the younger a kid is, they can't tell you what it is that the problem is. They just know that there is a problem, or they can't, especially in the moment. They might be able to come back and circle back to it later when they're calm again and explain to you what the problem was. But especially in the moment, when I was working with that kid who was really stressed out by the fact that they could hear electricity, I can't sit next to him at his desk that's right next to the outlet while he's got like a buzzing ringing in his ears and be like, just tell me what's wrong. Like, just tell me, because he can't think of anything. All he can think of is that there's this buzzing ringing in his ears. Sometimes there are actually situations where escape is impossible or less possible. These are short amounts of time or unusual events or major crises. If somebody is telling you there is no possible way to let this kid escape from this thing, so they just have to suck it up for days or hours or years or whatever it is, they are either being lazy about problem solving, or they just aren't educated about what it is that they could try to do in order to problem solve. And I try to assume the best of people. I have also sometimes worked with some people who seemed like they might be actively malicious, but most of the time people just don't know what an escape could look like. So when I am talking about unusual events or major crises or short amounts of times, I'm talking about you're on a roller coaster and it's about to go over the top and you decide that it is actually going to be a mismatch for you to experience this vestibular sensation. I am sorry, there's not a whole lot that we can do about that. Or your family is fleeing a hurricane and you're in a car and you're evacuating from it and you just need to drive 6 hours so that you're out of the storm's range. It is less of a priority that you are freaking out in the back because your brother is making weird noises. And it's like, you sometimes everybody's just got to kind of melt down and run away and deal, like, because there is an actual crisis or short amount of time or unusual event that cannot be gotten away from. But if you're talking about this is our classroom and we're doing class, you can't just rest on, well, you like, you just had to get over it. Like, there has to be something in place first for kids to be able to access and escape so that they can trust you in problem solving for the rest of it. So then we get to problem solving for the rest of it. And we really emphasized this a lot in the last talk, which is that the need and the behavior are not exactly the same thing. Sage's need, his need wasn't touch the wall. His need was, I need more sensory stimulation from the boring task of walking from point A to point B. And the behavior that he did to meet that by instinct was, ooh, cool textures, I'll touch the wall. And in some situations, that would just be okay. That would be fine. Now, if he was like, I'm walking from point A to point B and I'm bored, and so in order to try to meet my, need of some kind of more stimulation, I'll just like pet my friend and they hate it, then that would be a very clear sensory mismatch. And so the problem solution that you're looking for, or if he was constantly like ripping papers down off the wall by accident, or, who knows, like something like that where it was like causing a problem, that's where knowing that the need and the behavior are not exactly the same thing can be really helpful. There is a difference between a behavior that meets a sensory need and the sensory need itself. Touch wall is not one of the five senses. Touch is one of the five senses, so it can give you a clue about what it is. But then you can zoom out to the broader sensory need instead of what the behavior is. Sing Disney songs is not one of the five senses. Auditory is one of the five senses, and so you can zoom out to understand what it is that the greater need is. Something auditory is bothering you here, and figure out how it is that you can come up with a substitute thing that meets that need instead of just the thing that the kid reached for by default. Because now, a lot of times things don't cause mismatches. It's not like kids are just picking the wrong ones all the time, all their whole entire life. It's just that in some situations, there's more factors at play than kids are capable of thinking of, or other people, have to have consideration for them too, or the thing that they picked is actually like a little bit dangerous, or whatever it is. There are a lot of times where adults have a broader eye view than kids do on what the situation is. And so they're maybe able to give a more realistic or a more considerate of everybody problem solving suggestion for the sensory need itself, and not the behavior that is currently being used to meet the sensory need. If it's not one of the eight senses, it's probably not the need. It's the behavior the child is using to meet the need. My third section, or my third step for managing mismatch, really goes back to a lot of the stuff that I talked about in the first one as well. And that's understanding your own feel-good strategies, like I talked about extensively in the first one. Ways that you can experiment to find feel-good strategies if you don't know yours, ways that you can think about what yours are, like just in terms of what do you do to keep yourself feeling good throughout the day. This is the same slide that I showed earlier. And then also, what are your emergency coping strategies? So some of them might be the same as your feel good strategies, but others of them might not help. Maybe maybe sitting in the most comfortable seat that your work has when you're in a whole team meeting is one of the things that you do to keep yourself feeling good throughout the day. It's just one of the small little things that you do. But if you're like in crisis and you're having a terrible sensory time and you're feeling horrible and starting to melt down, then like going and sitting in the good office chair is not enough to like snap you out of that. That's just something that you do to keep yourself feeling good throughout the day, but it's not your emergency coping strategy. So that's the distinction between these two things. Feel good strategies are tiny things we do all day long to keep ourselves feeling good. Some of them might overlap with our emergency coping strategies. Maybe drinking your favorite coffee is one of your feel good strategies, and it's also one of your emergency coping strategies because taking a long drink gives you a time to pause, gives you a time to take a breath, gives you a rush of caffeine, tastes good, whatever it is. Like, so it does both. It is both, but sitting in the comfy office chair is not both. It does not pull you out of an emergency. What is your instinct when your body is in crisis? This is a good way to find emergency coping strategies if you don't know what yours are. What is your instinct when your body is in crisis? Are you a yeller? I am a yeller. Do you want to run away? Do you start to shut down? Do you want to fight somebody? There is no judgment here, I promise. Now, remembering that your behavior is not the same thing as your need, you can practice finding what the underlying need is. If you want to fight somebody when you are upset, then maybe the underlying need is proprioception. You start wanting to clench your fists and squeeze them. You start wanting to hit something. You're not actually going to hit something because you're a grown up. But knowing that your behavior or your wanted behavior is not the same thing as your need, it helps you identify the underlying sensory need. My instinct in crisis is to yell. There are a lot of things that could be underlying needs for yelling, and some of them are sensory and some of them are not sensory because not everything is sensory, even though sometimes it seems like I think that it is. If the underlying need that I have that is causing me to yell is that I want there to be less noise. And that might sound ironic, but it's the same as Alex humming their songs in class because they're trying to drown out a noise that's bothering them. If I tend to yell because I start to get overwhelmed by how much noise there is and I think that yelling will help, or not really think it like logically, but like instinctually feel as if yelling will help, then maybe my coping strategy is earplugs or headphones. If the underlying need is more proprioception because yelling does a lot of proprioception from my diaphragm and my lungs, then maybe and also my throat and my jaw because like yeah, like I'm yelling, I'm exerting all of those muscles, I'm feeling that stretch and that pressure. Then maybe my coping strategy is to chew gum instead because that will also give my jaw a lot of proprioceptive pressure. If I think that the underlying reason why I am yelling is because actually I just need to take a deep breath because a yell is a deep breath. It's just a deep breath that has a loud voice attached to it. Then maybe I need to take a deep breath. And if my underlying need is that I need new patterns for how to react in situations where I'm feeling overwhelmed. What do I even do when my kid is saying this type of thing to me? What do I even say when someone is saying this to me? It always comes out of me loud because I'm overwhelmed. My parents yelled at me and I don't know what to do other than to just yell when I'm in that situation. Then maybe educational content that teaches me new scripts might give me the access to practice. Okay, next time that my kid says something that feels disrespectful or next time that this type of thing happens, then instead I've practiced, I've learned, I've heard a new pattern that's different from the pattern that was laid for me when I was a kid. Lastly, setting up your environment goes a long way to helping manage mismatch. It gets both the kids who are the really relying on environmental strategies or the passive strategies, it gives them access to an environment that's kind of set up that they can rely on. And then it gives the active kids kind of a break from having to like actively figure out how to make their own needs be met all the time. An environment that has access to sensory supports, an environment in which you model using the sensory supports, And then I put novelty in there because, like I said, our brains filter out things that they don't think that they need to be actively paying attention to because they're trying to reserve resources for things that they do need to be actively paying attention to. And so something that I hear really commonly is like, well, we have headphones in our classroom and no one ever uses them. They're hanging right on the wall on a nail that says headphones, and then no one ever picks them up and uses them. And if you have never modeled feeling like, it might feel, and if you have like, like sixth graders or something, maybe it's weird to model it to them. But if you have little kids who don't, fully yet understand what sensory tools are, what it is that you're using them for, then even if it feels a little bit contrived, it can make total sense to not in a blaming way, not like you're punishing the kids for being loud, but at a time when everything is loud and fun on purpose, be like, wow, I'm so super glad that we're like having fun Friday and everybody's having a great time playing this cool high energy game that we're doing. And also, it's really loud to my ears. I'm going to put on the headphones, and you take them off the hook and you put them on your ears. And you may or may not wear them for a long time because then, if, a 5-year-old runs up to you and is like, I wanted to wear the headphones. And then you're like, oh, okay. You're also hearing it being really loud. Okay, cool. You modeled using the sensory supports. Novelty, you can bring visual attention back to something by changing the location that it's at, because then your brain has to reclock where stuff is in the room. Now, you don't want to do this constantly because then that wears out your resources. Like, there's a reason why your brain gets familiar with things. It's so that it doesn't use up all of its resources. But if you're wanting to bring visual attention back to something, literally just swap the location of what it's at in the room, because then everybody's brain has to reclock where it's at, and also in so doing be like, oh yeah, the headphones, like we have that. I needed that the other day when it was loud. And sometimes I'll do novelty in the form of playfulness, like now the bear is wearing the headphones, like the stuffed animal who we have on the chair. And then that also gives you a chance to model, because the kids are like, what? Why is the bear wearing the headphones? And you're like, I guess he thought it was loud. I do not know what kind of party the stuffed animals got up to last night while we were all at our house, but it must have been too loud for the bear because now he's wearing the headphones. I use headphones a lot because they're a really obvious and really overt and really popular sensory support that many classrooms have. But this is true of lots and lots of things as well. The stuffed animal can be using one of the fidgets to try to focus. Somebody can be using a visual timer. Somebody could be using like the wobble seating or the flexible seating that you guys have available. Somebody could be going in the calm down corner. Somebody could be, in the like crawled into the tent because they wanted less visual overwhelm. Whatever it is that you actually have access to, then access, yes, that's the first thing, and then also modeling it, and then also novelty in order to make sure that people are aware that it is there. And that it is normal for them to use it, that it is not just only the kid in your class who has the IEP who uses it, or only somebody who raises their hand and tells you that they're having a hard time is allowed to use it. Like, whatever it is that you have that is available for people to try to manage their sensory mismatches, then yes, it's a learning process. Yes, everybody doesn't do it perfectly from day one. But that is how you learn to more strategies to manage your sensory mismatch, is by actually practicing them and actually trying them out, and sometimes doing them wrong and sometimes doing them right, and getting feedback and all of that. So I'm going back to my kids who I talked about at the beginning. Aiden and Luna are two students in the same class. Luna is highly sensitive to noise, especially repetitive noises. Aiden makes noise to stim, self-regulate, and focus. When I talk about safe escape, maybe Luna has, like fully needs to leave. I'm thinking of real Aiden and real Luna, who have different names. And both of them were both autistic and ADHD as well, and had IEPs and had tons and tons of supports in place. And so in actuality, a lot of times, Luna would leave and go to the counselor's office because that was something that worked for them. But in hypothetical Aiden and Luna, it may not need to be quite as dramatic. Maybe Luna is seated at a different side of the room than Aiden is. Maybe Luna has headphones that she can access. Maybe Aiden has a set time when he can go just full on beatbox for the 5-minute transition between math and science class. Or you put on some music and anybody who wants to can dance around and sing a little bit, and that ends up meeting Aiden's need and he's good. Maybe Aiden's need isn't auditory at all, it's oral and in his mouth, and chewing gum or chewing on a chewy will actually help him meet that without making auditory noises. There's a lot of problem solving that could be done here. Oop, I accidentally slipped into need doesn't equal behavior. Maybe Aiden's need isn't auditory, maybe it's something else. And you find the underlying need and you figure out what it is that works for him. And this would be different for different kids. And that's why by instinct, I accidentally give like 14 examples at the same time. Knowing yourself is going to be consistent regardless, because that's like a lifelong process. But when it comes to setting up your environment, Luna having access to the headphones that she does not have to raise her hand, she doesn't have to ask you, she doesn't have to go get them out of a special box where nobody can even see them, and so she forgets that they're there. Like all of that is barriers to being able to actually manage the sensory mismatch. Um, Setting up your environment so that sometimes it works to be like, if you want to work quietly on the work, then, we're going to be on this side of the room. And if you want to work with a partner on the work, then we're going to be on this side of the room. So we're going to give it a little bit of space. Obviously, that depends on your space that you have available or things like that. But sometimes you can help with those kind of environmental adaptations too. Then this is the last little bit going back to Summer and Apollo are two children in the same house. Summer wants all the lights on in the playroom, and Apollo wants all the lights off in the playroom. Who gets their sensory needs met? Who gets their way? So when I look at safe escape, there are other places in the house to play than just the playroom. So it is not like if you want to play, you must be in here. And if you don't, you're left out and it sucks and there's nothing fun to do. And so just, you better just deal with the sensory mismatch. It's much easier at home to be able to safely escape in a lot of ways. The need doesn't equal the behavior. So if the behavior that, Summer thinks would be helpful would be turning on every single light and the twinkle lights and the disco ball and dancing around, I might come to realize that actually the underlying need is she wants to dance and move, and she believes that she has to have a disco ball before she can move. Like that's how that feels right to do to her. But maybe if we go in the other room and I put on music, then we can leave Apollo in the playroom to play in a dimmer setting, and we can go have like a full on party somewhere else. Or maybe the need is visual, because this sounds very visual. I was going for a creative one, but maybe the need is visual. Well, visual things don't have to just be overhead lights that are for everybody. I could see, what if I put a nightlight in Summer's room that's fun and twinkly? Or what if I give Summer a glitter wand that she can like do the back and forth in front of her face and watch the glitter? And so then that's not affecting Apollo as much. By proxy, I've turned it into a personal sense by looking at the underlying need instead. Also, I can easily do the same thing for Apollo to do it in reverse. Apollo, what if you go inside of this tent? Hey, look at that. It's suddenly darker. Setting up, and a lot of what I just mentioned was setting up the environment. Like, hey, look, we have a tent, or hey, look, we have a glitter wand, or there are fun lights in our house, or there are areas that are dimmer and areas that are lighter. Or this doesn't have to do with vision at all. It's actually about wanting to dance, wanting vestibular. So now, there's a swing outside. Summer, you could go swing on the swing instead of having a dance party in the playroom, because that's not going to work right now. Whatever it is. Mismatch doesn't inherently mean competition. Sometimes two sensory needs can just coexist. So don't always feel like you have to jump to problem solving you don't have to make a problem out of something that's not a problem. If two kids seem like they're needing different things, but they are both content with how much of it they're getting from an environment, even if they're getting different things out of it, that can be okay too. But I hope that this gives you more tools for when there is actually a mismatch, there is actually like a competing needs, that this gives you more access for how it is that you can solve some of those things.
Kelsie, thank you so much. So much incredible content. I love how your brain works. It's so helpful to hear and learn all this through your lens. I especially love the reminder that behavior doesn't always reflect need,
Mm-hmm.
and to really put on our researcher's lens and investigate what is behind that behavior, that action for that child. And I
Yeah.
especially appreciate the core question, what is the underlying need and how can we work to meet it versus how do I stop this
Yeah.
behavior? I really appreciate that reframe and that reminder. So thank you so much. We have some time for folks to use
Yes.
the chat or come off mute to offer questions, scenarios, give appreciations. Well, we'd love to give you all the floor if you'd like to contribute. You're getting lots of appreciations in the chat, Kelsey.
Yes, somebody mentioned encouraging the children to participate in solving the conflict, and absolutely, especially depending on what age and especially with an adult mediator, but that can be super super valuable to be able to express what the needs are. A big part of interoception is that kids will sometimes two kids might be doing exactly the same thing and for exactly the same reason, but one of them might know it and the other one might not because that kind of awareness develops at different ages. And when someone doesn't know it, sometimes they'll say, I don't know, but sometimes they'll confabulate something. And that's not because they're like lying. It's because you're trying to make sense of why it is you're doing a thing that you don't know why you're doing it. And even adults do this. I had an example on my page where my husband kept telling himself that he was just drinking more Mountain Dew because he was celebrating that he finished his degree. And then later we checked and the water filter had gone bad. And so like he had a personal goal of wanting to drink more water in life. And then for like a week, he was just drinking Mountain Dew, and he was like, "Well, I'm celebrating. Well, I'm so." And no, the water tasted bad, but like he didn't clock it. It took him longer for his brain to process. Actually, the problem was taste. Like this didn't taste good anymore. Um, and so that will happen with kids. So I always bring that up when I'm talking about problem solving with kids because kids can accidentally confabulate the wrong reason for why it is that they did something when they're trying to retroactively explain why it is that they did it. And so it just becomes even more, that doesn't mean don't use them in problem solving, but it just means become more aware of not turning it into a blame or shame thing. Like, if they just say like, well, I don't know. I was just bored. Then if you like turn around and you're like, like mad about it, then that doesn't encourage them to keep growing that skill. Somebody's raising their hand. Brienne is raising their hand.
Hi. First of all,
Hi.
I followed you for a long time, so I'm really excited to be part of this training. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I also wanted to add on, I in another training at one point, somebody brought up the idea as far as encouraging children to be part of the problem solving
Mm-hmm.
was to use as a strategy, especially when children say things like, "Oh, Theo's bad because Theo does
Mm-hmm.
this thing," or like, "Oh, why is Jack always doing that?" And like I really appreciated this advice of saying like, "Oh, why do you think and how can we help them feel comfortable in the class or how can we help them? Why do you think they're running or why do you think that is?" Instead of just, "Oh no, he's not bad. We're all friends at preschool," but like
Yeah,
really allowing them to be like, how can we support them so it's not just, "Oh yeah, that's Theo. He has a one-on-one," or that's, so on. So like it all is a community building experience.
absolutely. Vero, did you want to say something too? You're muted right now.
My question is actually a little bit more directed about like adult needs versus child needs.
Mhm.
Like I've worked with children who clearly do have sensory needs, and the specific example I have is that there's a child who shows a lot of sensory needs, and but because of family logistics and schedules, they don't want their child to nap. And we've noticed and collected data of how those sensory needs really go and get heightened
Mhm.
after not having a nap. So it's like, do you have any strategies or supports on how we can sort of help navigate and, you know, give some eye opening to adult needs versus child needs?
Yeah. I mean, I think that part of that can just be like, if this is the policy of our place, then this is the policy of our place. Like I've seen somewhere it's like we're not gonna like the kids are allowed to have like at least like 10 minutes or 15 minutes to fall asleep or whatever, and then if they're still awake after that, then we'll like go play so that it's not just like uh the kid who can't fall asleep just like having to like lay there for an hour, but then also the kids who do are like able to like listen to their body and not just like be on schedule because it's convenient or like whatever it is. um and so if you're able to be like, this is like the policy that we have at our place, then like that's the policy that we have at our place. But sometimes that it's understandable why adults are trying to figure it out, because if it's like, okay, well then my kid's super wired and then they don't sleep until, midnight, then it's like, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to manage all of this? And to some extent, um that's like a little bit of just like a weird phase that everybody kind of goes through. And so like there's, with some things there's no solving out of a developmental phase, like it's just a little
Mhm.
bit weird and hard. Like separation anxiety is another example of a phase that just like kind of everybody goes through that, and there's no like persuading a kid out of being real intense about their parent leaving when they're like between 9 and 18 months old. Um but um but you could do things that kind of experiment with the sensory demands of it. Like if we do chiller activities in the morning and then we do energetic activities in the afternoon, or if we do vice versa, does that make any difference in how it is for the kid? And things like that, where you're kind of just like playing around with, especially proprioception and vestibular, where you're getting more of that body movement, more of that sense. And then also I would say things like sunlight in the morning, where that's a really strong one for brain cues about waking up. Obviously not always hard, sometimes hard to come by in Seattle. But those types of like exploring the different, so both there's the advocating to parents side of things, and then there's the exploring the different things and seeing if that makes it easier or better for anybody, or harder or worse, and then stay away from that one. That can give you more data to work with sometimes.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we might have time for one more question for appreciation. And while you're
Hi.
thinking of that, I'm going to just post in the chat the last chance to sign in if you need to today, and how you can attend our next session with Kelsie in June.
I have a question, Becky. I just can't figure out how to raise my hand.
I see one. I also see the person
No,
with
go
the
ahead.
black star line.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Um, I work with K through fifth grade after school, often getting off the bus exhausted. And I've been noticing a lot of issues with interoception and really trying to figure out what's going on. I also have an older child who has issue with recognizing when he needs to go to the bathroom. So a lot of accidents happening, and we've been working with the family and with him and pediatrician. There's no actual like physical thing happening, but a lot of also rejection to being told what to do. So if you have any advice on helping support that kiddo with going to the bathroom and just in general that like exhausting time of day.
Yeah. Yeah, so sometimes, so if you're dealing with a kid who feels really targeted uh, by being told directly what to do, or by being singled out, then some modifications or adaptations for that can be to address everybody, even if you're really trying to address one person in that. Another thing can be to try to find ways to let something in the environment support that for you and for them, instead of needing direct personal intervention to do it. And what that looks like can be super different things. That can be a timer, that can be a thing that pops up on a screen device of some kind, that can be a visual reminder at a place where something is, and a visual reminder can be something that's really like the common ones that are recommended, like a schedule or whatever, but it can also be something that's unusual, like I will forget to drink water if I don't have a water bottle in my line of sight. And so it can be something that does have like the same meaning to everybody. Like, I mean, this, I'm not actually really recommending this, but if you put up a sign that said like, go to the bathroom at 4 o'clock, that would be an example of that. But also if you problem solve with the kid at a time when the kid isn't feeling threatened and is feeling calm and is feeling connected, and you decided that this stuffed animal duck that I put next to you on your table means, remember, it's been a while since you go to the bathroom, then that's what that means. Like, you can make anything mean anything. And so sometimes finding ways to prompt, if an adult does have to prompt, then finding ways to prompt that don't involve saying it directly like a command, but doing something nonverbal. Or if you do have to say something, not saying it like a command, but saying it like a wondering or like a musing or like a, I'm wondering if anybody from this group over here needs to go to the bathroom. Now would be a great time to do it. The bathroom's available, or things like that that are like a little bit less direct. Sometimes those come off as less threatening to kids who have nervous systems that are more likely to be threatened by some of the direct stuff.
Thank you all for your questions. I want to honor people's time. It's 5:02. I wonder, Kelsie, if you are able to stick around for just a minute or two if anyone had one last question and didn't get a chance to ask. Oh, we have one more thing come through the chat here.
Oh, I just put I was going to say in the chat.
Oh, great. Okay,
Yeah.
thank
And
you.
thank you again. I really appreciate the content and the delivery.
Thank you
Absolutely. Thank you so
so
much for being
much.
here.
Thanks for
Yeah,
joining.
I'll hang around for a minute if anybody needs anything or anything.
Okay. Oh, I hear a little
Feel free to
one
go.
there. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We wish you all a restorative and a meaningful Memorial Day weekend. And we hope to see you in June when Kelsie returns. And everybody take good care.